Welcome to lesson 2 of B5, the living body. Today's lesson is on joints. So for that C grade, we're going to recall that there are different types of joints. So we're going to have a look at the different types of joints as well. For that B grade, we're going to describe the structure of a particular joint called a synovial joint or synovial joint and compare ball and socket joints to hinge joints. And for that A grade, you need to explain the functions of each part of a synovial joint. Okay, so this is the key word that's going to go alongside that A grade. So we're going to make, and the first thing we're going to have a look at is, well, we've covered this before in lesson 1, but why do we actually have a skeleton? And we've mentioned that it's for this support. It supports those muscles and organs. But the key feature, what we're going to be having a look at today, is this: the movement and how movement takes place, and it takes place at those joints. The first thing we're going to have a look at is how do we move. And that joint is a place where two or more bones are actually meeting. And without the joints, our skeleton would not be able to move. The bones at joints are bound together by the long, strong, flexible fibres called ligaments. You might have heard of tendons as well. Well, ligaments will actually join bone to bone, whereas tendons connect muscle to bone. Okay, so we've got two differences there. Ligaments, bone to bone. Tendons are from muscle to bone. So we're going to have a look at the synovial joint, and this is an ideal synovial joint. This is your arm, so this at the top is your humerus, and that's the one that's pointing from your shoulder up here. And then we've got the radius and ulna, which are your two bones which are in your forearm. So first of all, we're going to have a look at what in actual fact is surrounded by it. So we can see that it's held together by bone to bone, and these are the ligaments. So they're going to hold the whole thing in place. Also around this, there is a capsule of ligaments, and they're going to protect but also enclose this joint fluid. Now that joint fluid is very important because that joint fluid is called synovial fluid, and that synovial fluid is there to lubricate the joint. So then we've got our functions of those particular parts as well. The synovial membrane, which is just on the inside of that capsule of ligaments, actually secretes that synovial fluid. So we've got something that secretes it, we've got something that makes sure it's still there, and we've got that lubrication taking place. At the end of the bones, as we discussed in lesson 1, there is also this cartilage, and that's there to reduce that friction from taking place. So we need to know from lesson 1 what is there in order to be able to apply it to lesson 2, in particular focusing on that synovial fluid and its use. So synovial joints, well, they can give you any synovial joints. This is another one. This is in our leg. Okay, so if we are sat down, obviously this bone will be slightly longer, but here would be our bottom, and here down here is our foot. So we've got the femur and the tibia there, and we've got the cartilage protecting that end of the bones, but also we've got that fluid, that vital synovial fluid, which is there for lubrication. And the synovial membrane, if you can remember what that does, that secretes the synovial fluid. At the movement of the joints, the muscles are attached by tendons, as we've said. So these tendons here are attaching bone to muscle. All right, so we can see on here that we've actually got 4 tendons in total, and they're going to be holding this muscle here, which is our bicep, and this muscle here, which is our tricep, and the same on this side. We've got our bicep and our tricep. Okay, so B for bicep and T for tricep. So what happens when movement actually takes place? Well, the muscles will actually have to pull the bone. Okay, that's what they do. They pull the bone, and they have to do that by contracting it. So when you bend your arm, your bicep muscle, this one here, will actually contract. But as that one contracts, the tendon, because it's so strong, does not move at all. Does not actually change in length. It doesn't stretch. So it pulls the radius, which is this bone here, upwards. So that's how we manage to bend our arm. When you straighten your arm, which is like this image here, where the arm is actually straight, your tricep muscle, which is this muscle here, is again going to contract, but your bicep muscle is going to relax. The tendons Again, they don't change in length, but they're going to pull, in this case, it's going to pull on the ulna, which is this bone here. And your arm is going to straighten. So a pair of muscles that are going to be arranged in this way, working together, the biceps and the triceps, are called antagonistic muscles, okay, or antagonistic pairs. So as one muscle is contracting, the other one is going to be relaxing. Now we're going to have a look at different examples of joints, and the two that you need to know about for this specification is the hinge joint and the ball and socket joint. Although there is another one that we're going to have a look at and a little bit of a mention, and that's the pivot joint, and we're also going to have a look at some fixed joints. So the hinge joint, for example, in our knuckles, knee and elbow, only moves backwards and forwards, whereas a ball and socket, such as our hip and shoulder, will move in all directions. We do have some joints which are pivot joints, which will have some circular movements, such as in your neck. Also got some fixed joints, and these are immovable joints. So your skull is made up of many bones, but they join together by fixed joints, and at birth babies have a cartilage patch on the top of their skull, so that when the bones of the skull can be squeezed as the baby passes down the birth canal, these joints in the skull are then fused, and this is what happens in this image. That's where the fixed joint is actually taking place. The skull is going to then protect the brain inside because they've been fused together. So the skull is an ideal example of that, but the pelvis is another example. Now the other ones that we're going to have a look at are hinge joints. We've already had a look at these in our two examples of synovial joints. We've got our elbow and our knee. And we can see that we've got the cartilage at the end of those bones, and we've still got that synovial fluid in the middle of it. So a hinge joint is normally synovial joints as well, but as their name suggests, they only allow that forwards and backwards movement. So all they're going to do is go from one direction to the other, forwards and backwards in both examples that are given. We've also got our ball and socket joints. Now there are different types of synovial joints in the body, but in ball and socket joints, which is again, there's our cartilage protecting the end of those bones, and there's also going to be some cartilage in the socket as well, but we've also got that synovial fluid there. And in ball and socket joints, the rounded end of one bone fits inside the cup-shaped ending of another one. So what they can do is they can allow rotation in all directions, okay? So they can allow rotation in all directions, and that's why they're called the ball and socket. And examples of those are in our shoulders and in our hips. Sometimes, obviously, joints become worn out or damaged. That should be an O. I'll just change that, worn out. And some can be replaced, including hip and knee joints. And this is an example of a hip joint that's actually been replaced. So there's our example. There's our titanium usually that's been put in place. There are several benefits of joint replacement surgery. Obviously we've got improved movement, we've got pain relief because it's not going to ache anymore when you try and work, and we've got alignment as well, so if it is becoming deformed we can actually reset it back into place. But obviously you've got to go undergo surgery in order to do that, so we've got to have some recovery time from that. And it does take a long time. Physiotherapy may be needed for those. So, in terms of our objectives for today's lesson, first of all, to recall that there are different types of joint. So we've discussed the two that are in the specification, but we've also had a look at another two. See if you can remember what those 4 different types of joint that we've discussed are. We need to describe the structure of a synovial joint, so naming those different parts of it and comparing those particular ball and socket to hinge joint in terms of the range of movement there, but in fact they are both synovial joints. And for that A grade, we need to explain the functions of those parts of a synovial joint. So what are the functions of the cartilage? What are the functions of the synovial membrane, the synovial fluid? And what is the difference between ligaments and tendons? Thank you.